Hey guys, it's me, Stephanie. Happy Saturday. Today is going to be a fourth video in a series. I'm reading The Nightmare Before Christmas. I'll link the other chapters and videos down below. I'm not sharing the book because it's not an illustrated book, so I'm sitting behind my phone. If you want to pause to read the information. I shared this in the first video. Get as far as we can today, and I'm going to pick up where I left off yesterday, but happy October the 15th. Worry, anger, and fear did not help Santa's powers of speech. Before he could manage a reply, the three terrible little children who had kidnapped him were dragging him away. Wouldn't anybody help him? This was a nightmare. No, please, wait, he begged. But the trick-or-treaters giggling drowned out his pleas. This is a nightmare, thought Sally the rag doll as poor Santa was hauled off. All her fears about Christmas were turning out to be true. It was a disaster. She had to do something. She racked her ragdoll brain. I know, she whispered and slipped away. Jack, entranced with Santa's red cap, never saw her leave. The cap, he thought, was just the thing to complete his dazzling Christmas outfit. He adjusted it so it sat at a rakish angle on his skull, then got ready to climb into his sleigh. Once the mayor finished his farewell speech, Jack could be off. Jack looked up toward the mayor and blinked. He and everyone else in the crowd looked around in disbelief. A thick white fog had appeared out of nowhere and was swirling through the town square. It was soupy. It was sinister. It was as bone-chilling and blinding as the fog that came on Halloween. And like the fog, it had swallowed everything up. Oh no, groaned Jack. We'll never be able to take off in this. The reindeer can't see an inch in front of their noses. Out of the fog came moans and complaints, a loud monster chorus of disappointment. Christmas was ruined. How could this be? Safely hidden by clouds of white mist, one face smiled in relief, the face of Sally the rag doll. For it was Sally, of course, who had mixed up a special potion and dumped it into the town fountain. The fog was her creation. Deep in her rag doll stuffing, Sally felt that Christmas could not go on, and she had to stop it. Now it looked as if she had succeeded. She peered through the thick fog at Jack. Had he given up? No, he was talking to Zero, his little ghost dog, who hovered in the air with his jack-o'-lantern nose glowing. Zero, with your nose so bright, Jack asked, won't you guide my sleigh tonight? Zero's answer was a bark of excitement and a loop-the-loop through the air. I guess that means yes, said Jack with a grin. He turned to the crowd. My friends, he announced happily, Christmas is saved. Zero's going to lead my sleigh through the fog. As the crowd whistled and cheered, Zero took his place at the head of the reindeer, his nose shining like a beacon. Jack leapt aboard and cracked his whip. We're off, he cried. Ho, ho, ho! The sleigh rose into the air to wild applause. Only one note of worry sounded in the crowd, and it was so soft and so sad that not a single creature heard it. Goodbye, Jack, whispered Sally. Oh, how I hope my premonition is wrong. Chapter 9. As Sally wandered away from the town square, her heart heavy with dread, and as Jack sailed through the skies laughing with joy, Lock, Shock, and Barrel were having a brief but very interesting discussion about their prisoner, Santa Claus. So where are we taking him? Asked Barrel. To Oogie Boogie, of course, said Lock and Shock. Of course, said Barrel, with a nervous giggle. Oogie will like that. Santa didn't know who Oogie Boogie was, but he did know that Christmas was in grave danger. Why wouldn't these 3 little terrible children let him go? "Haven't you ever heard of peace on earth and goodwill to men?" he asked from inside the sack, struggling to get free. "No!" cried the trio gleefully. They tightened their grip. This was so much fun. Jack was having fun as well. He was spreading Christmas cheer throughout the world, or so he thought. On his first stop, the little boy in the house where he crash-landed had stared at him in silence when he came slithering down the chimney. But when Jack handed the boy a present, one of his very own special shrunken heads, the cries of joy from the little fellow were very loud indeed. Jack had no idea that he had just given an innocent child the most blood-curdling shock of his young life, and those sounds he heard as he drove off in his sleigh, they were far from cries of joy. They were shrieks of horror. As Jack continued on his rounds, delivering dozens of creepy, dark, and gloomy Christmas presents, he heard many shrieks. There were shrieks from the wreath with the long arms, shriek for the toy grave-digger's kit, shrieks for the miniature electric chair. There were blood-curdling screams for the eyeball marbles in the slug farms. Jack was pleased to hear them, but of course he didn't know any better. When people scream, "These presents are horrible!" he thought he was hearing shouts of delight. So on and on he went, merrily delivering his dreadful gifts, unaware of the havoc he was creating. Time after time, he mistook shouts of anger and disgust for cries of gratitude, and answered them with a cheerful, "Merry Christmas!" He never heard the doors slamming, the locks clicking, or the frantic telephone calls to the police. As far as Jack was concerned, everyone was having a wonderful time. He didn't know it, but down below, Jack was considered a criminal, and like a criminal, he was being hunted down with very powerful guns. But when Jack first saw the bright searchlights and heard the explosions of gunfire, he was actually pleased. "Look, Zero," he cried. "They're celebrating. They're thanking us for doing such a good job." Then gunfire nearly struck one of the reindeer, and it began to dawn on Jack that something was very, very wrong. Chapter 10. Long before Jack began to worry, Sally the rag doll knew that something was wrong. She had seen the explosions in the sky, and the witch vine was abuzz with grim reports that Jack's trip was in trouble. Something told Sally that if anyone could help, it was Santa. But where was he? At best, he'd be with Lock, Shock, and Barrel. At worst, he'd be with Oogie Boogie. Sally shuddered from head to toe. What a frightening thought. But something told her it was so. Sally knew that Lock, Shock, and Barrel, she knew what they were like. And she knew there was only one place those nasty little trick-or-treaters would take their captive, to the underground torture chamber that evil Oogie called home. So Sally headed for Oogie's lair, and there a terrible sight met her eyes. Oogie's dungeon was dark and dank, wreathed in cobwebs, littered with bones. It was a miserable, hopeless place, and right smack in its center lay Santa, bound hand and foot. On a giant roulette table was arranged a strange array of gambling paraphernalia, from worm-ridden dice to slot machines designed to shoot real bullets. Standing over Santa, grinning with malice, was Oogie Boogie. His huge bag-like body was filled with buzzing bugs which crawled in and out of his gaping mouth. Oogie was doing his best to make Santa miserable, and he was succeeding. But then, being creepy, scary, and disgusting was Oogie's job. He was the boogeyman, after all. As Sally watched in horror, Oogie danced around Santa, threatening him. "You're ugly, old man, but you might be tasty," he said, rolling his dice, "and I'm getting hungry. Want to be the main ingredient in a nice snake and spider stew? I'll boil you alive. How about it?" "No," cried Santa. "Let me go, please. The children are expecting me. I've got to deliver their Christmas presents." "Ha, ha, ha," Oogie replied. "It's hopeless. You're finished. You haven't got a prayer, 'cause I'm the big bad boogeyman, and you ain't going nowhere." Santa writhed and strained at the ropes that bound him, but it was no use. He couldn't get free. Oogie loomed closer, closer, and closer. Meanwhile, high in the sky, a missile was moving closer and closer to Jack. When it hit, it destroyed the sleigh instantly and sent Jack on a dizzying, all-too-rapid fall to earth. Jack landed in the arms of a stone angel in a cemetery. His jawbone had come unhinged in the fall, so for a moment he lay there silently. He was unable to speak and unable to avoid the terrible truth. His version of Christmas was a complete and total failure. This thought was far more painful than the shock of falling. What a fool he had been! What a stupid mistake he had made! If Jack's jaw had been attached, he would have groaned in frustration, but it wasn't. So he simply lay there and waited for Zero to retrieve his lost part. "Good dog," he murmured as soon as Zero brought it to him. Slowly Jack put himself together, and as he did, he made up his mind. He would set things right, but to do that he had to find Sandy Claus fast. Could he do it? "I've got to try, Zero," he told his faithful dog. "I just hope there's still time." Filled with resolve, he dashed to a tombstone, lifted it, and hurried down a long flight of steps to Halloween Land. Chapter 11. Lock, Shock, and Barrel were having fun. As usual, it was because someone else wasn't. Perched above the trapdoor to Oogie Boogie's dungeon, they looked on as Oogie tormented not one prisoner but two. Sally the Ragdoll's desperate attempt to rescue Santa had backfired, and now she was Oogie's captive too. But just as the three trick-or-treaters leaned in to get a better look, they heard a dreadful sound behind them, a sound like the rattle of skeleton bones. Could it be? It was Jack Skellington. Shrieking in terror, the three of them turned and ran off into the night. Jack took their place at the trapdoor. Far below he could see Santa and Sally strapped to a table over a steaming cauldron. In spite of her plight, the brave Ragdoll was still defiant. "This isn't over," she cried. "Not by a long shot. You wait till Jack hears about this. By the time he's through with you, you'll be lucky if—" At that moment, the mayor's voice interrupted her. It came blaring over a loudspeaker from his hearse out in the street, and the news it delivered was terrible. "The King of Halloween has been blown to smithereens," announced the mayor. "Jack Skellington is now a pile of dust." Sally heard this, and tears came to her eyes. Oogie heard it and roared with triumph. If Jack was gone, he would be the king of Halloween Land. "A pile of dust," he repeated gleefully, turning to his captives. He smiled hungrily. "And dust to dust." Dancing a little victory dance, he sang, "Oh, I'm feeling hungry. One more roll of the dice ought to do it." He tossed his giant dice. They rolled across the dungeon floor, finally coming to a stop, with 2 ones showing. "What? Snake eyes!" Oogie roared, and pounded the floor with his foot until the dice bounced back, this time showing 11. Oogie grinned in satisfaction. "Looks like I won the jackpot." Turning the crank of the torture machine, he began to lower Sally and Santa into the enormous steaming cauldron. "Bye-bye, Dollface and Sandy Man," he bellowed as they screamed. Giving the crank one last turn, he dropped the dice. He dropped the table below the cauldron's rim. The boogeyman cackled as he waited to hear his victim's final splash, but there was nothing. No sound at all. "Huh?" he said. Reversing the crank, he slowly drew the board back up from the cauldron. There, instead of Sandy Claus and Sally the Ragdoll, was Jack Skellington. "Hello, Oogie," said Jack, leaping nimbly from the table and onto the roulette wheel. "Jack!" cried Oogie, drawing back in fright. "But they said you were dead. You must be double dead." Stomping on a lever near his foot, Oogie sent the roulette wheel spinning, throwing Jack off balance. Immediately, a ring of giant playing cards, each showing the king of spades, rose up around the edges of the wheel. The kings, coming to life, lunged at Jack with very real swords, dodging wildly. Jack managed to stay just out of reach of their twirling weapons. He was so distracted he didn't notice an enormous 8-ball descending from the ceiling, its sides splitting into spinning blades. Oogie laughed as Jack weaved around the wheel, trying desperately to dodge both dangers. The bugs in Oogie's sack-like body flew this way and that, making his sides heave and bulge. "Well, come on, Bone Man," he said, pulling a chain above his head. The cards' flailing swords folded in and the cards retracted, but instantly an army of one-armed slot machines rolled forward. "Fire!" shouted Oogie, and the machines began shooting from their loaded arms. Quick as a wink, Jack leapt on top of one of them. Cursing in frustration, the boogeyman reached for another button and sent the roulette wheel flying towards Jack. "Look out!" screeched Sally. Just in time, Jack jumped out of the way, letting the wheel's revolving blades slice off the arms of each of the shooting slot machines. The ragdoll sighed with relief. Jack jumped again, landing in front of Oogie. Now they could have a fair fight. But just then the boogeyman stepped onto another lever. "So long," he shouted, calculating himself up to the top of the 8-ball and out of Jack's reach. Jack looked up at him. "How dare you treat my friends so shamefully?" he said in a quiet voice. Reaching up with a bony arm, he tugged on a small string hanging low from Boogie's body. For Sally and Santa, watching from the corners of the dungeon, it took a moment to realize what was happening. Slowly at first, but then more and more rapidly, the boogeyman began to unravel. Though Oogie wriggled and writhed, there was nothing he could do. In a matter of seconds, there was only a mass of loose bugs where he had been. "Now look what you've done," Oogie's voice cried pitifully from the swarm of creeping insects. "My bugs! My bugs!" Creeping, crawling, and flying, all the insects except one quickly disappeared. Then splat! Santa squashed the last bug with his big black boot. Oogie Boogie was gone for good. Sally beamed with relief. Santa wiped his damp forehead, and Jack apologized. "Forgive me, Sandy Claus," he said. "I'm afraid I've made a terrible mess of your holiday." "Bumpy sleigh ride, Jack?" said Santa. "Christmas is a lot more than a bag of toys and a red cap." Snatching his hat from Jack's head, he turned to leave. "I hope there's still time," Jack called after him. "Of course there is," said the old elf. "I'm Santa Claus." And with that, he pressed a finger to the side of his nose and shot up the narrow tube that led outside. "He'll fix things, Jack. He knows what to do," said Sally, trying to make him feel better. I'm almost finished reading the book. I just have the rest of this chapter and an epilogue, but I'm going to stop here because in my reading tomorrow I want to share the movie stills from the book with you all. I hope everyone's having a wonderful weekend. Happy Vlogtober, Vlogoween the 15th. I will talk to you guys in my next one. Thanks for listening.